You ugly freak. You cripple. You actually think you can compare yourself to Tiffany? My husband Kyle's cold sneer pierced right through my already numb heart. The heavy scent of antiseptic filled my nose. Lying on the cold hospital bed, I looked through my left eye, the only one that still had some blurry light perception after being burned by concentrated sulfuric acid. I could see his handsome profile and the delicate, lovely Tiffany standing beside him. They thought I was in a coma and couldn't hear them. Kyle, don't say that. She did save your life, after all. Tiffany's voice was sickeningly sweet, yet laced with a hint of impatience. Saved me? She deserved it. An ugly freak, disfigured and blind. She should be grateful I let her stick around. If I didn't pity her, I would have divorced her ages ago. Kyle's voice was dripping with contempt. Look at that face. It gives me nightmares. I don't even want to touch her. If it weren't for my family's reputation, why would I have married a cripple? My finger twitched slightly, my chest heaved violently, and the monitor began to emit a shrill alarm. Shoo, I think she's reacting. Tiffany nervously tugged at Kyle's sleeve. Let's go. I don't want to stay in this depressing place. What are you afraid of? She's practically dead anyway. Kyle snorted dismissively, his footsteps fading away. Once she kicks the bucket, all the assets are mine. Tiffany, then we can go to Hawaii and get married. Their voices disappeared at the end of the corridor. The monitor's alarm grew more urgent, but my consciousness was sinking into boundless darkness and resentment. Yes, I had saved him. During AP chemistry in our senior year, he had clumsily knocked over a bottle of concentrated sulfuric acid. When everyone else froze, I was the fool who treated him like a god. I instinctively shoved him out of the way. The scalding liquid splashed all over me. The agonizing pain of burning skin and the choking acid mist marked the beginning of my lifelong nightmare. My right face was destroyed. My right eye was permanently blinded. I went from a straight-A student with a bright future to a pathetic cripple in everyone's eyes. And he, the man I traded half my life's light for, married me out of guilt and public pressure. Then he spent 10 years using cold violence and emotional abuse to grind my last shred of self-esteem into the dirt. I wasn't ready to let go. If only I could do it all over again. Endless darkness swallowed me, then was instantly torn apart by blinding white light. So, under light conditions, the halogenation of alkanes is a free radical substitution reaction. Everyone look here. A familiar yet distant voice rang in my ears, accompanied by the dry smell of chalk dust. I snapped my eyes open. I wasn't looking at a stark white hospital ceiling, but at the dusty fluorescent lights of my high school chemistry lab. I blinked. My vision was clear. No abstractions. I instinctively raised a hand to touch my right cheek. The skin was smooth and warm. Not a single scar. I stared at my hands in shock, pale, slender, with defined knuckles, not the rough, deformed hands of someone who had used a cane for years. Hey Chloe, why are you spacing out? The teacher's calling you. A clear, boyish voice sounded beside me. I turned my head stiffly and saw that face etched into my bones. 18-year-old Kyle. He was wearing his blue and white school uniform. Sunlight slanted in through the window, casting a small shadow on his thick lashes. He was frowning slightly, tapping my textbook impatiently with the end of his pen, wearing a "why are you daydreaming again" expression. Memories flooded back like a tidal wave. This was the last chemistry lab of the first semester of senior year. At the podium, the chemistry teacher was explaining the safety precautions for the next experiment. Beside me, Kyle was twirling his pen, bored out of his mind, his eyes drifting constantly toward the front row by the window, to the seat of the prom queen, Tiffany. It was this class. It was today. Okay, team leaders, please come up to collect the equipment and reagents. Be careful with the concentrated sulfuric acid. Handle it gently. Safety first. The teacher raised his voice. As our team leader, Kyle stood up lazily and walked toward the podium. My heart began to pound uncontrollably. Blood rushed to my brain and my ears buzzed. I watched him casually accept the rack of test tubes and beakers from the lab assistant. Among them, a brown glass bottle contained the liquid that could ruin my life. He walked back to his seat and placed the equipment haphazardly on the lab bench. His eyes glued once again to Tiffany's back. Tiffany seemed to sense it. She turned back and smiled. Kyle immediately perked up like a rooster on adrenaline. He sat up straighter, wanting to show off in front of her. "I'll handle the experiment, you just watch," he said to me arrogantly, reaching out to grab the reagent bottle containing the sulfuric acid. This was the moment. In my past life, because he was eager to show off and distracted, his elbow hit the iron ring stand, causing the bottle to wobble and tip. I stared dead at his hand. Every muscle in my body pulled tight like a drawn bow. In my mind, the heart-wrenching pain from my past life intertwined with Kyle's cold sneer before my death. Hate spread like wildfire. Why? Why should my life pay the price for your stupidity and selfishness? Why should I trade my sight and my future for 10 years of your contempt and torture? This time, it's your turn. Kyle's fingers touched the cold bottle. He tried to look cool, grabbing it with one hand. The moment he lifted the bottle, his elbow, just like in my past life, slammed into the iron stand next to him. Clang! The stand shook violently, and the brown bottle teetered in his hand. In my past life, that was the second I lunged forward. But this time, though my body screamed with the instinct to rush in, a stronger force, a cold resolve from the depths of my soul, nailed me to the spot. I simply leaned my upper body back slightly, less than half a step. The movement was so subtle no one noticed, but it was the most complete break from my foolish past self. Time seemed to slow down infinitely. I saw the bottle slip from Kyle's hand, drawing a desperate parabola in the air. I saw his eyes widen in terror, his handsome face written with disbelief. I saw the brownish, viscous liquid lunge like a viper from hell toward the face I had once been obsessed with for my entire youth. Ah! An inhuman scream tore through the silence of the chemistry lab. It was a roar mixed with ultimate pain and fear, a sound I had never heard from the outside before. In my past life, that scream had been mine. In this life, I was the bystander closest to hell. The concentrated sulfuric acid splashed onto Kyle's face, neck, and the arm he threw up to block it. His uniform corroded and carbonized at a speed visible to the naked eye, emitting puffs of white smoke. The pungent smell of burnt protein and the acrid acid mist instantly filled the air. Kyle clutched his face, rolling frantically on the floor, screaming, his other hand clawing wildly, trying to peel the bone-deep agony from his body. Crash! He knocked over his stool and other equipment on the table. The sound of shattering glass mixed with his screams, playing a chaotic symphony. "Oh my God! Get the teacher! Water! Get water!" The classroom exploded. Girls screamed, boys shouted in panic, and the sound of crashing desks and chairs created total bedlam. Students nearby backed away in terror, fear written all over their faces, terrified the horrific liquid would touch them. The chemistry teacher reacted first, rushing over with a pale face shouting, "Don't touch him! Don't use plain water yet! Quick, get the sodium bicarbonate solution! Hurry!" And I sat in the eye of this storm, unusually calm. My heart beat coolly and steadily in my chest. The pain, the burning heat, and the bone-deep itch that had tortured me day and night in my past life were now Kyle's solo performance. I could even clearly smell that familiar, nauseating burnt scent, seeing his exposed skin turn red, blister, and then ulcerate. Fair is fair, right? Why are you just standing there? My calmness formed an eerie contrast to the surrounding panic. I didn't scream. I didn't back away. I didn't show a shred of panic. My gaze swept over Kyle rolling on the ground and landed on Tiffany, who was standing at the classroom door, equally terrified. She covered her mouth, her beautiful eyes full of horror and a hint of disgust. That's right. She loved Kyle's face the most, and now that face was being destroyed inch by inch right before her eyes. "Chloe, what are you doing? Help him!" A male classmate yelled at me. I moved then, as if waking from a dream. But I didn't rush toward Kyle, nor did I grab any first aid supplies for him. Under everyone's shocked gaze, I simply stood up calmly, stepped around the convulsing Kyle, walked to the podium, and picked up the bottle of saturated sodium bicarbonate solution the teacher had just mentioned, the one used for neutralization. Then, I carefully poured the solution over the drops of acid that had splashed onto the floor. Small bubbles fizzed up from the ground. The acid was neutralized. Only after finishing this did I look up at the frantic teacher and the few brave boys who had rushed over. In a tone bordering on indifferent, I said, "Teacher, the acid on the floor has been treated. It won't hurt anyone else." The chemistry teacher froze, looking at me with a complicated expression. He probably couldn't figure out why I, Kyle's lab partner and the person closest to the accident, could be this calm. The sound of ambulance sirens approached. Soon, paramedics in white coats rushed in, lifting the semi-conscious Kyle onto a stretcher with professional speed. A trail of drips, blood or corrosive fluid, was left in the corridor. The classroom fell into a deathly silence. Everyone's eyes focused on me. There was sympathy, confusion, but mostly an unspeakable scrutiny. They were all probably thinking the same thing. Why didn't she save him? If it were the old Chloe, the one who valued Kyle more than her own life, she would have thrown herself on him instantly, blocking it with her own body. But that Chloe had died thoroughly after 10 years of torture, and that final humiliation on her deathbed. I ignored their stares and walked silently back to my seat, looking at the messy lab bench. A few drops of acid had splashed onto Kyle's textbook, eating black holes through the paper, wisps of smoke still rising. I reached out and swept the ruined chemistry book, along with everything on the desk that belonged to him, onto the floor. Then, I placed my backpack right in the center of the desk. From today on, this desk belonged to me alone. Ring. The dismissal bell rang, breaking the solidified atmosphere in the room. It was like someone pressed play. Students started shuffling to pack their bags, though everyone tacitly kept their voices low, stealing glances at me. I calmly packed my things, shouldered my bag, and was the first to walk out of the classroom. The sunlight was perfect, warm on my body. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of grass and earth, not the despairing scent of hospital disinfectant. I could see the complete world. I could feel the complete sunlight. This feeling was wonderful. As for Kyle, the gates of hell had already opened for him. Next, he just needed to walk in step by step and experience every bit of pain I had endured in my past life. And I would watch coldly from the sidelines. I hadn't walked far from the school gates when a black sedan screeched to a halt in front of me. The door flew open, and a well-dressed middle-aged woman stormed out. It was Kyle's mother, Mrs. Parker. Behind her followed Kyle's father, Mr. Parker, his face ashen. "Chloe." Mrs. Parker's voice was shrill, her face twisted in a way I'd never seen before. She rushed up to me and slapped me hard across the face. My cheek burned, and I tasted iron in my mouth. In my past life, this slap had also landed on my face. Back then, I just clutched my cheek, crying and trying to explain incoherently. But now, I just looked at her calmly, my eyes rippling with nothing. "You vicious girl. Why didn't you save my Kyle? You were sitting right next to him. Why did you watch him get hurt? You two grew up together. Is your heart made of stone?" Mrs. Parker grabbed my shoulders and shook me violently, practically spitting in my face. "Mrs. Parker, please calm down." My voice wasn't loud, but it was unusually clear, cutting through her hysteria. My calmness seemed to enrage her further. "Calm down? My son is lying in the hospital, his face is ruined, and he might lose an eye. How can you tell me to calm down? It's all you. You must be jealous that my Kyle is handsome and smart, so you deliberately didn't save him." A crowd of students and parents had gathered, pointing at us. "Why didn't you save him?" Mr. Parker stepped forward too, looming over me, his gaze like a knife. I ignored their roaring. Under their aggressive stares, I slowly took my phone out of my pocket, pressed the record button, and turned the screen toward them. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," I began, my voice steady enough to surprise even myself. "First, according to school safety regulations and liability laws, regarding accidents on school grounds, the responsibility lies primarily with the school and the individuals involved. Kyle is 18, he is a legal adult. He should be responsible for his own operational errors. Second," I paused, my gaze sweeping over their stunned faces, "you are publicly attacking and slandering me, and I have recorded everything. If you continue, I won't hesitate to call the police. Defamation might not carry a heavy sentence, but having a criminal record probably wouldn't look good for Mr. Parker's business, would it?" Mr. Parker's face changed instantly. Mrs. Parker froze too. She probably never expected the Chloe who had always been meek and submissive in front of her to speak with such sharp, logical clarity. As for why I didn't save him, I put away my phone, meeting their eyes with a cold curve of my lips. I want to ask, why on earth should I save him? You. Mrs. Parker was too angry to speak. Just because we're neighbors? Because we grew up together. I scoffed, my voice full of undisguised mockery. Mrs. Parker, over the last 10 years, have you counted how many times I brought Kyle breakfast? Not much, maybe 1,000 times. Do you know how much of his homework I copied for him? How many notes I organized? How many times I lied to teachers for him and took the blame? Did you ever ask him? My voice grew louder and colder. Everything I did for him, you all took for granted. He enjoyed my sacrifices while mocking me behind my back for being a clingy tag-along. He messed up an experiment due to his own negligence, and instead of holding him responsible, your first reaction is to blame me, the bystander, for not dying for him. Is there any justice in that? The murmurs around us grew louder. The onlookers' expressions shifted from simple curiosity to disdain for the Parker parents. We didn't mean that. Mr. Parker tried to save face, but his voice lacked conviction. That is exactly what you meant. I interrupted him, taking a step forward to look straight into Mrs. Parker's well-preserved face, now twisted with rage. I used to be stupid. I thought my devotion would be exchanged for sincerity. Now I understand that not everyone is worth sacrificing for. My life is precious. My future is valuable. Why should I risk it for someone who doesn't cherish me? All right, we're even now. I straightened my collar, which she had crumpled. From today on, Chloe, you have nothing to do with your family or Kyle. We owe each other nothing. With that, I didn't spare them another glance. I turned, pushed through the crowd and walked away. Behind me, Mrs. Parker's curses and Mr. Parker's shouts mixed together, but I didn't care anymore. When I got home, my parents weren't back yet. I locked myself in my room and walked to the mirror. The girl in the mirror had delicate features and unusually calm eyes. I touched my intact face, feeling the warm, vibrant skin, and tears finally slid down uncontrollably. These weren't tears of joy or sorrow, but of farewell. A farewell to the foolish, humble self who would have died for love. From today on, I lived only for myself. At dinner, I told my parents exactly what happened at school and the confrontation with the Parkers. Mom listened, stopped eating, and looked at me with worry. Chloe, are you sure about this? Falling out with the Parkers like that? Mom! I looked up, my eyes firm. If I were the one hurt today, would they have stood up for me? No. They would have just thought I was a burden, finally having a legitimate reason to cling to their family for support. Dad was silent for a long time. He sighed and put a piece of pork rib in my bowl. Eat. She's grown up. She has her own mind now. Mom and I support you. My nose stung. I lowered my head and shoveled rice into my mouth, tears dripping into the bowl. Yes, I had grown up. It just cost me a lifetime to do it. A week later, Kyle was discharged. I saw him again during Monday morning study hall. He walked into the classroom just as the bell rang. His face, neck, and right hand were wrapped in thick white gauze, revealing only his intact left eye and half his mouth. The uniform that used to fit him perfectly now hung loosely on his gaunt frame like an ill-fitting costume. When he appeared at the door, the noise in the classroom cut off instantly. Everyone hit mute, staring at him with complex expressions: sympathy, curiosity, pity, and unconcealed fear. Kyle clearly couldn't handle the scrutiny. He lowered his head and practically rushed to his seat. Because of his injuries, he stumbled and nearly fell. Once, he was the star of the school, radiating light wherever he went. Now he was an anomaly everyone avoided. He sat in the empty seat next to me. The desk, once filled with his things, was bare because I had cleared everything out. He silently pulled a textbook from his bag, but with his right hand in gauze, even simple movements were clumsy. The book fell to the floor with a heavy thud. No one moved to help, including me. I just glanced at it indifferently and went back to my math problems. He stiffly bent down and struggled to pick the book up with his left hand. I could feel the gaze from his single exposed eye shooting at me like a poison needle. He didn't say a word all day, just sat there gloomily. Even the teachers seemed uncomfortable, avoiding looking in his direction during lectures. After school, as I was packing up to leave, he suddenly stood up and blocked my way. We need to talk. His voice was raspy and dry, like sandpaper on wood. It sounded terrible. There's nothing to talk about. I tried to step around him. He suddenly reached out with his left hand and grabbed my wrist. His grip was hard, as if he wanted to crush my bones. Chloe, why have you become so heartless? He asked through gritted teeth, his one eye rolling with malice and confusion. Did you want me to die that badly? I never wanted you to die, I said calmly, wrenching my hand away. I just didn't want the person dying to be me. What do you mean? He froze. What do I mean? I took a step back to a safe distance. Kyle, you chose your path. You should bear the consequences. Don't act like a victim pushing blame onto others, it just makes you look pathetic. Pathetic? He laughed a low, jarring laugh full of misery and madness. Yeah, I'm pathetic now. I'm disfigured, half-blind, the school joke. And you? You're perfectly fine, sitting there with a clear conscience. Are you happy? Is this the revenge you wanted? I'll say it again. You caused your own tragedy. I looked at him coldly. If you had any self-awareness, you'd spend this energy fixing your messy life instead of questioning me. I walked out of the classroom without looking back. Behind me, he let out a suppressed roar like a wounded beast. I knew this was just the beginning. In my past life, after I was disfigured, he said similar things to me. He said, Chloe, don't think you can cling to me forever just because you saved me. Look at yourself, you look like a monster. You make me sick. Now, I was simply returning the pain he once inflicted on me, untouched. From that day on, Kyle changed completely. He was no longer the sunny campus idol, but a violent, trapped animal. He started coming late, skipping class, and ignoring lectures, just staring at me viciously with that single eye. His grades plummeted. I, on the other hand, poured all my time and energy into studying. I cut out all unnecessary socializing, ignored the gossip, and filled my brain with formulas, theorems, and vocabulary. I had to get into the best university. I had to become excellent to completely break free from the shadows of the past. I had to let Kyle and everyone who looked down on me know that Chloe's life did not depend on anyone else. In my world, there was no more Kyle. There was only my bright future. Days passed in intense, rhythmic review. A weird balance formed between Kyle and me. He was falling fast, and I was climbing desperately. We shared a desk, yet lived in two parallel worlds that would never intersect. The classmates got used to it, carefully avoiding the low-pressure zone around us. In this oppressive atmosphere, the first person to extend an olive branch was someone I didn't expect, the chemistry rep, Ethan Luo. Ethan was the class genius, permanently occupying the #1 spot in the grade, but he was solitary. Aside from collecting homework and answering teacher questions, he barely spoke to anyone. He always wore black framed glasses, his gaze behind the lenses cool and sharp, as if seeing through everything. One afternoon during chemistry study hall, I was stuck on a complex organic deduction problem. You should use a solution of bromine in carbon tetrachloride here, not bromine water. A cool voice sounded above my head. I looked up in surprise to see Ethan standing by my desk, holding a workbook. He pointed at the chemical equation on my scratch paper. Bromine water contains water, which reacts with the aldehyde group and interferes with the experiment. Using carbon tetrachloride as a solvent excludes water interference, allowing for a precise addition reaction. He pinpointed my issue in 2 sentences. Thanks, I said, sincerely impressed. The genius really had a clear mind. He nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he pulled up a chair and sat in the empty spot across from me. You've been working hard lately. He adjusted his glasses. It was a statement, not a question. Finals are coming up. Of course I have to work hard, I replied, looking down to fix my steps. That's not what I mean. He looked at me, his gaze behind the lenses focused and serious. I mean, you've changed a lot. My pen paused. That day in the lab, he said calmly, his voice not loud but clear enough for Kyle beside me to hear. Everyone panicked. Only you thought to neutralize the acid on the floor immediately. You were calm and smart. You knew what was most important. I looked up, meeting his eyes. There was no pity, no doubt, just a pure, almost appreciative calmness. He was the first person to affirm my actions after the accident. My heart felt lightly touched. I just did what I thought was right, I whispered. The right thing is often not what most people would choose. The corners of Ethan's mouth seemed to lift slightly. I've seen your chemistry homework lately. You've improved a lot. Some of your approaches are interesting. Want to try solving this problem using a different method? He pushed his workbook toward me. I looked at him, then at Kyle, whose face was dark and fists clenched. I suddenly found it funny. In my past life, all my efforts were to catch up to Kyle, to stand with him. Yet he never truly looked at me. In this life, when I decided to live for myself, someone actually saw my light. Sure. I smiled and took the workbook, diving into the sea of problems with him. We kept our voices low, but in the quiet study hall, our discussion was distinct. I could feel Kyle's gaze stabbing my back like ice picks, but I didn't care. From that day on, Ethan became my ally in studying. He shared his notes, pointed out gaps in my knowledge, and I offered new logical perspectives when he hit a wall in physics. We didn't talk about romance or gossip, just marched side by side through the ocean of knowledge. This pure, efficient exchange made me feel fulfilled and happy in a way I never had before. I started looking forward to study hall every day, looking forward to the sense of achievement after conquering difficult problems with him. Kyle saw all of this, and the resentment in his eye grew daily. He probably thought I had found a new boyfriend so quickly that I had forgotten him. He was wrong. I hadn't found a new boyfriend. I had found myself. The final straw that broke Kyle was Tiffany's complete betrayal. Since Kyle was disfigured, Tiffany visited the hospital twice. The first time, she brought fruit and flowers, said a few empty comforting words, and left in under 10 minutes. The second time, she was dragged there by Mrs. Parker. She stood far from the bed, looking like she'd seen a ghost, unable to hide the disgust and fear in her eyes. After that, she never showed up again. After Kyle was discharged, he tried to find her a few times, but Tiffany always avoided him with excuses like studying or tutoring. Everyone knew the beautiful prom queen had unilaterally cut Kyle out of her world. Only Kyle held on to a last shred of fantasy. He stubbornly believed Tiffany just needed time to accept his appearance, that if he was sincere enough, he could win her back. That pathetic fantasy was smashed to pieces at the annual school arts festival. On the day of the festival, the school was decorated with lights, buzzing with youthful hormones. As the arts committee member, Tiffany wore a pure white dress and performed a piano solo, winning thunderous applause. She was like a proud white swan, beautiful, dazzling, inviolable. Kyle was like a rat hiding in a dark corner, wearing a low cap and mask, wrapped up tight, standing at the very back of the crowd, staring obsessively at the light on the stage with his one eye. After the performance, Tiffany walked off stage surrounded by a group of girls. I don't know where Kyle got the courage, but he suddenly rushed up and blocked her path. "Tiffany, I need to talk to you." His voice trembled with emotion. Tiffany and her friends jumped. When she realized it was Kyle, a look of revulsion instantly appeared on her face, but with so many people watching, she forced a polite veneer. "Kyle? Is something wrong?" "Tiffany, I know I look scary right now." Kyle's tone was almost begging. He pulled a small, exquisite box from his pocket. "I saved up for a long time to buy this necklace for you. I've liked you since freshman year. Can you give me a chance?" The area went quiet. Everyone's eyes focused on the former golden couple. Tiffany looked at the jewelry box, then at Kyle's face, hidden behind the mask and hat. She didn't even reach out to take it. She took a step back, as if afraid of getting dirty. "Kyle, don't do this." Her voice wasn't loud, but it was cold as ice. "We're just classmates. We were before and we are now. Please don't come looking for me anymore. My mom wants me to focus on my studies." "Just classmates." Kyle swayed. He excitedly ripped off his mask, revealing the half of his face covered in gauze and hideous scars. "That's not what you said before. You clearly liked me. Is it because of this face? Is it?" His crazy action drew suppressed screams from the girls around. Tiffany turned pale with fright and backed away. "You're crazy. Put your mask back on," she shrieked, her beautiful eyes full of terror and blatant contempt. "Kyle, it's impossible between us. Stop lying to yourself. You just scare me now. I'm begging you, stay away from me." With that, she grabbed her friends and fled the scene as if escaping a plague. Kyle froze in place, holding the small box, like a statue abandoned by the world. Whispers pricked his ears like tiny needles. Oh my God, look at him. So scary. Serves him right. He wasn't careful. Tiffany is pretty harsh though. They were classmates. Harsh? Would you want to date a disfigured cripple? I heard every word. Ethan and I had just come out of the physics Olympiad meeting and witnessed the entire farce. Ethan frowned. Why humiliate himself like that? I didn't speak, just watched Kyle quietly. Slowly, very slowly, he bent down, put the rejected box back in his pocket, put his mask back on, and limped away into the shadows. His back was hunched and desolate. In that moment, I felt no thrill of revenge, only a cold indifference. Tiffany's choice was exactly what I expected. How could a girl that exquisite and self-centered accept a flawed partner? What attracted her to Kyle was his handsome skin and his status as the school god. When those vanished, his deep love became cheap and laughable. In my past life, Kyle treated me the same way. After I was disfigured, he distanced himself, giving all his tenderness to the glamorous Tiffany. 10 years of marriage was just a cold grave to me. Now it was his turn to taste the bitterness of being despised and abandoned by the one he loved. Fair play. I withdrew my gaze and said to Ethan, "Let's go to the library." I thought of a new solution for that problem. Okay. Ethan nodded. We walked side by side toward the library, leaving the drama and that pathetic figure behind us. After the arts festival, Kyle completely collapsed. He started sleeping on his desk all day, never handing in homework, never listening. Even when teachers called on him, he would just look up with that numb, singular eye, then put his head back down. His world became a gray ruin, while mine, through day after day of effort, became wider and brighter. Midterms were the most direct, brutal test of our status. The atmosphere in school was stifling. Only Ethan and I kept our rhythm, reviewing, discussing, analyzing errors. When the last exam bell rang, everyone slumped in their chairs. I put down my pen and exhaled. The knowledge formed a clear network in my mind. I was confident. 3 days later, the results were out. The red honor roll was posted downstairs. Names and scores were listed from highest to lowest. I squeezed through the crowd, scanning from the top. Look, Ethan is first again. 721 points total. Insane. Second is that guy from class 2. Third place. Senior class 1 Chloe Yu. Total score 705. Someone read my name aloud in surprise. I saw it. Not far below Ethan's name, my name stood out in bright red, third in the grade. In my past life, I wouldn't have dared dream of this. I was good, but because I was so focused on Kyle, I usually hovered around the top 20. Classmates looked at me with amazement. A few girls I knew crowded around to congratulate me. Chloe, you're amazing. You're rocketing up. Did you get a secret tutor? Tell us your secret. I smiled and handled the enthusiasm, but inside I was calm. I knew I deserved this. I had traded countless nights and entertainment for it. Through the crowd, I saw Ethan standing on the other side of the bulletin board. He was looking at me, a faint smile in his eyes behind his glasses. We exchanged a look, understanding everything without words. Suddenly, a commotion started. Check Kyle. Where is he? Everyone started scanning the bottom half of the list. Found him. Here. A boy's voice rang out in disbelief. Kyle Pei, total score 430. Grade rank, 799. There are only 1,000 students. That rank meant he was in danger of not getting into any college, let alone a good one. Silence fell over the crowd. Following the boy's finger, I found that once familiar name at the very bottom. It was buried in a sea of strangers, inconspicuous and shameful. The crowd parted automatically as Kyle walked up. Wearing his hat and mask, he walked slowly toward the red list that determined his fate. He stood there, looking up, searching carefully from top to bottom. I didn't know if he was looking for my name or his own. Finally, his gaze locked on the very end. He stood there for a long time, motionless as a stone. The sunlight hit him, but seemed swallowed by the cold gloom surrounding him. I could imagine the humiliation and despair he felt. falling from the clouds into the mud in just a few months. Beneath the bulletin board, two worlds existed. On one side was me, surrounded by praise, the teacher's pride, the dark horse. On the other was him, shrouded in pity, a failure crushed by reality. We were in the same space, but separated by an impassable chasm. Once, I stood on that side looking up at him. Now the roles were reversed. I didn't look at him again. Surrounded by classmates, I turned and left. I knew that the moment I turned around, the boy I had loved into the dust had completely died in my world. And my life was just beginning. The midterm results were a pebble thrown into a calm lake, causing massive ripples. I became the model of turning over a new leaf, while Kyle became the cautionary tale of falling from grace. This contrast was the ultimate humiliation for Kyle and his parents. I thought things would settle down, that Kyle would fade out of my life. But I underestimated the shamelessness of his family. After a few days of silence, a carefully planned smear campaign hit me without warning. It started in the parent group chat. One night, my mom walked into my room, face pale, holding her phone. "Chloe, look at this." I took the phone. It was a long, tearful post from Mrs. Parker in the Senior Class 1 chat. "Fellow parents, I am Kyle's mother. I know my son did poorly on midterms. But there is a reason. My son is like this because of our classmate Chloe Yu. Everyone knows they grew up together. Chloe always liked my Kyle. But since the chemical accident, she's changed completely. Not only did she ignore Kyle when he was hurt, she's been openly flirting with another boy, Ethan, at school just to provoke him. Kyle is suffering. He's hurt physically, and psychologically he's dealing with the betrayal of a childhood friend. How can he study? That Chloe, she scored high on purpose just to make my Kyle look pathetic. She wants to ruin my son. How can a girl be so vicious?" Below the text were photos of Kyle in his hospital bed and smashing things at home in a breakdown. The group chat exploded. Some parents, not knowing the truth, chimed in. "OMG, is that true? That girl looks so quiet, but she's that manipulative. Poor Kyle. They were classmates, that's too cruel." Of course, some rational parents questioned it, but they were drowned out by Mrs. Parker and her cronies. Rumors spread to the school, becoming more ridiculous and vicious. Some said I engineered the accident to ruin Kyle because he rejected me. Some said I was two-timing Kyle and Ethan. Some even said I put a curse on him. Overnight, I became the school's femme fatale. Walking down the hall, I felt the stares. People whispered manipulative bitch and fake behind my back. I was in the eye of the storm. "Ignore them. They're bored," Ethan whispered to me, looking upset since he was dragged into the rumors too. "I'm fine," I said calmly, continuing my physics problems. But was I? No. A fire was burning inside me. In my past life, I was surrounded by rumors too. After I was disfigured, everyone called me a jinx, a burden. Back then, I just cried and begged Kyle to believe me. He just looked at me coldly and said, "Chloe, look at yourself. Are they wrong?" This time, I wouldn't cry. Tears are the weapon of the weak. To face this madness, I needed absolute logic and a fatal strike. That afternoon, my homeroom teacher, Mr. Lee, called me to the office. "Chloe, you've heard the rumors?" Mr. Lee looked serious. "I have. Kyle's parents have come to the school demanding disciplinary action, claiming you have bad character, and are harassing a student." Mr. Lee sighed. "The school is under pressure. I believe you're not that kind of person, but can you explain what happened in the lab that day?" I looked at Mr. Lee. This was my chance. "Mr. Lee, I don't need to explain," I said calmly. "I need to prove it." "Prove it? How?" "I request permission to use the chemistry lab with the surveillance cameras. I am willing to reconstruct the entire experiment in front of the school leadership and teachers." My gaze was sharp. "I will use rigorous science to crush these ignorant rumors." Mr. Lee was stunned. He had probably never seen a student in the center of a scandal act with such boldness. He was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll apply for it." The school was efficient. On Monday afternoon, a special experimental demonstration was held in the large lecture hall lab. The principal, the dean, all senior teachers, the Parkers as relatives of the involved party, and Ethan, my invited assistant, were present. Kyle didn't come. He was either too scared or too proud. 3 HD cameras were recording. "Student Chloe, you may begin," the principal said solemnly. I nodded, put on my goggles and gloves, and took a deep breath. "Leaders, teachers, hello. I stand here not to argue, but to restore the truth." My voice rang clearly through the microphone. "The rumor says I planned this accident. So first, I will demonstrate the probability of planning such an event." I went to the blackboard and drew the lab layout, marking the equipment, seats, and the iron stand. Based on high school physics, this is a force transmission problem. I started calculating. Kyle is 182 centimeters tall, 70 kilograms. The force and angle of his elbow hitting the stand, combined with the stand's mass and stability, affect the result. I listed formulas. The teachers began whispering, their expressions shifting from scrutiny to surprise. Calculations show that only when the impact force exceeds a critical value at a specific point on the stand can the bottle fly in a specific parabolic trajectory to land exactly on Kyle's face. I turned to the audience. In other words, this was an extremely accidental event involving multiple low-probability variables. To artificially design this requires an understanding of physics and chemistry far beyond a high schooler, plus countless simulations. Do you think I have that capability? The lab was silent. The Parkers were turning pale. Next, the reenactment. I walked to the bench. "Ethan, please play the role of Kyle." Ethan sat in the empty seat. Now mimic his action, one-handed, distracted, reaching for the acid. I used a water bottle instead of acid. Ethan reached out lazily, elbow bumping the stand. Clang. The bottle shook but didn't fall. Again. Harder. Ethan hit it harder. The bottle fell, but away from him. "Angle is wrong," I corrected. He was looking at the window, body turned. His elbow hit from this angle. I adjusted the stand in Ethan's arm. Again. On the third try, the bottle flew at a tricky angle, the water splashing exactly into the air where Kyle's face would be. "See that?" I raised my voice. "Only in that specific, incorrect, negligent posture does this happen. Did I force him to sit like that? It's a coincidence." Mrs. Parker shrieked. "Who knows if you calculated it? Then let's look at the second issue." I ignored her and turned to the principal. "The rumor says I left him to die. I ask you, in a chemical burn emergency, what is the first principle of first aid?" A teacher answered, "Flush with water or neutralize if severe." "Correct." I nodded. "But you ignore a premise. Concentrated sulfuric acid releases massive heat when mixed with small amounts of water, causing secondary burns. Without a large source of running water immediately available, the correct protocol is to wipe, then flush." Was there a shower at the desk? No. The sink is down the hall. In the time it took to run there, Kyle would have been burned worse. So what did I do? I looked at the camera. I grabbed the only correct item within reach, saturated sodium bicarbonate, to neutralize the acid on the floor, preventing the damage from spreading. My response was calm, fast, and fully compliant with safety protocols. Does that look like leaving him to die? My voice echoed in the room. The teachers were silent, looking at me with shock. They didn't see a problem student, but a future scientist with logic and wisdom beyond her years. Finally, I looked at the pale Parkers. Rumors stop at the wise, but for those who act with malice, I reserve the right to pursue legal action. I took off my goggles and bowed deeply. The video was posted to the school website that afternoon. The rumors collapsed instantly. I had slapped every doubter in the face with undeniable facts. The next day, a notice was posted. The school criticized Kyle's parents for spreading false rumors and demanded a public apology. This notice was a death sentence for the Parkers' reputation. Kyle was socially dead. The apology happened in Friday's homeroom. The parents didn't show up. Only Kyle stood on the podium. Mask on, head down, he mumbled. "I'm sorry, Chloe. My parents and I were wrong to slander you." It was dry and insincere. I didn't even look up from my test paper. His apology meant nothing to me. After class, I packed up to go to the library. On the stairs, Kyle appeared like a ghost from the shadows, blocking me. No one is here. He dropped the act. Are you satisfied? He looked up, his one eye burning with rage. Watching me apologize like a clown? Watching my family get humiliated? Does it feel good? I feel nothing, I said. You brought this on yourself. I brought this on myself? He sneered, stepping closer. Chloe, don't forget, I'm like this because of you. If you had pushed me away, if you had shown me even a little care, I wouldn't be like this. So, I have to be disfigured for you. And then act like a saint comforting you afterwards, to be worthy of you? I laughed at his logic. Shouldn't you? He asked self-righteously. Do our 10 years of feelings mean nothing? 10 years of feelings. The phrase was a rusty knife poking an old wound. In my past life, after 10 years of neglect, I asked him the same thing. I remembered his answer. He was wiping cake off Tiffany's mouth. He glanced at me and said coldly, Chloe, look in a mirror. You ugly freak, you cripple, you think you deserve to talk to me about feelings. The memory faded, replaced by cold ash. Kyle, I said softly, devoid of emotion. I had a dream recently. He paused. In the dream, I was the one hurt. I was disfigured and blinded saving you. You got into a top university, a golden boy. You married me, but despised me every day. Finally, you said to me. I repeated the words carved into my soul. You ugly freak, you cripple, do you think you deserve to be loved? Kyle's face went white. He stared at me, lips trembling, unable to speak. So Kyle, I stepped back, save your questions. What you're suffering now isn't even 1/10,000th of my dream. You don't deserve my pity. I walked past his stiff body and went downstairs. I knew I had finally, completely destroyed him. Life returned to normal. Kyle evaporated from the class dynamic. He was a shadow. My focus was entirely on studying. With 1 month left until the big exam, the college entrance exams, Ethan and I were inseparable. We met early, skipped lunch breaks to study in the library, and stayed late. We were comrades. What's your target? He asked one night. MIT. Chemistry. I answered without hesitation. My lost dream. He adjusted his glasses. I'm aiming for Harvard. Life Sciences. MIT and Harvard. Neighbors and rivals at the top of the world. See you at the top. He held out a fist. I smiled and bumped it. See you at the top. I worked harder than ever. On the final mock exam, I was second in the grade, right behind Ethan. The night before the big exam, I got a text from Ethan. Tomorrow. Calmness. I replied. You too. May we get what we wish for. I lay in bed, thinking about this rebirth. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about redefining myself. A girl's value isn't in who she marries, but in who she is. The exam days were a blur of focus. I wrote my name, Chloe U, with power and clarity. Then came the waiting. On results day, I locked myself in my room. My parents were pacing outside. I typed in my ID. Enter. My breath stopped. Perfect scores in math and science. A total that was nearly impossible. I threw open the door. Mom. Dad. I did it. My mom cried instantly, hugging me tight. My phone rang. It was Mr. Lee screaming, Chloe, state top scorer. You're the valedictorian of the entire province. The next few days were chaos. Interviews, banquet invitations. I was a star. During a TV interview, a reporter asked a sharp question. Chloe, we heard about the accident with your lab partner. There were rumors you didn't help him. As the top scholar, what do you say to those doubts? The room went quiet. I looked at the camera, thinking of my past self crying in the dark. I picked up the microphone. Regarding the accident, science has proven my innocence. As for friendship, any healthy relationship must be based on equality and respect. Blind sacrifice often yields not gratitude, but entitlement. That accident taught me something important. I paused. Like on an airplane, put on your own oxygen mask before helping others. Life is the same. Before you destroy yourself to save someone else, make sure you are safe and whole. Only by loving yourself can you have the capacity to love others. My future is my own responsibility. Thank you. I bowed. Applause erupted. The next day, my oxygen mask declaration went viral. I received my acceptance letter from MIT. Ethan got into Harvard. We texted. Congrats, top scorer. Same to you, runner-up. See you in Boston. See you there. 8 years later, Geneva, Switzerland. I stood on stage in a white suit, presenting to top global bioscientists. Our team's new bioactive gel, Phoenix, simulates the extracellular matrix to guide tissue regeneration, minimizing scarring. Images of healed burns appeared on the screen. Applause thundered. I was no longer the high school girl. After MIT and a PhD, I joined a Swiss biotech firm. I wanted to help people like my past self. After the speech, I saw him. Ethan stood in the corner in a blue suit, gold-rimmed glasses, looking at me with the same gentle appreciation. He was now a rising star in gene editing at Harvard. We had stayed close, academic allies and soulmates. I walked over with champagne. Dr. Luo. Dr. Yu. Brilliant speech. He clinked his glass against mine. I heard, he said suddenly, Kyle got divorced. Domestic violence. He's working a dead-end job back home. I listened, feeling nothing. It was like hearing news about a stranger. It's in the past, I said. Yes. He looked at me seriously. Chloe, I'm returning to China to start a lab at our top university. Congrats. I need a co-founder. His eyes burned. A world-class expert in skin regeneration. My heart skipped a beat. Is this a job offer? Yes. And it's the start of me formally pursuing you. We met at the top, just like we promised. He stepped closer. Chloe, will you give me and yourself a chance? I smiled, a smile as bright as a phoenix rising from ash. Okay. 1 year later, we founded a research center together. We were partners in the lab and in life. It was the equal, respectful relationship I had always wanted. On my 30th birthday, Ethan proposed in the lab with a 3D printed titanium ring in the shape of a DNA double helix. Dr. Yu, will you be my life partner? I will. Years later, we returned to our hometown for a project. At a chemical supply warehouse, I saw a hunched man in dirty work clothes moving heavy barrels. He wore a low hat, but I recognized the scars. Kyle. He looked up. His one eye met mine, then shifted to Ethan, who was brushing a leaf off my shoulder. Shock, then humiliation filled his face. He turned and fled into the shadows like a rat. What's wrong? Ethan asked. Nothing. Just saw a falling leaf. I held Ethan's arm, and we walked into the sunlight together.